The games industry is a deeply embarrassing place to work sometimes. And to think about that, I'd like you to imagine a very special place. It's on an industrial estate in southwest Nottingham, and it's the boardroom of Games Workshop, where all the executives are gathered, discussing the last year. And the lead executive, not the CEO, lead executive, he's got a badge saying that. He's talking about what a brilliant year it's been. Got the Hobbit license, switched to casting miniatures in resin, launching new rulebooks. Everything's going amazingly, just raking in money. But after he's finished his summary of that, he says, but there's this other thing that I've called you all here today to discuss. And it's really bothering me. It's always been a bit of a niggle, the whole of the time I've spent here. But it's just grown and grown to the point where it's completely consuming me. And it's that I don't think tabletop war games about space fascists caving each other's heads in are getting quite the cultural and artistic respect that they deserve. I just don't know what to do about it. And one of the other executives gets quite excited, says, yeah, I've been thinking about this too. It's really bothering me. In fact, I want the next decade of my life to be spent working on this. I want this to be my legacy. Because I don't think, when it comes to tabletop war games, about space fascists kicking the shit out of each other, I don't think people really appreciate the contribution that such games make to contemporary discourse. But I don't have any ideas, I don't know what to do about it. And another executive sticks his hand up and says, perhaps we aren't putting enough skulls on things. Like, maybe we should just put, or maybe it's not the amount of skulls, maybe it's the type of skulls. Like, we could license celebrity skulls, or we could just make sure to have some more diverse skull representation on tanks and banners and stuff in our space fascist armies. And the lead executive cuts in at that point and says, look, this well-intentioned, I appreciate you've not been here for very long, but these are all things we've tried, and while they did create a kind of sales spike, it didn't have the sort of cultural impact that we were hoping. We need to take it right back to basics and do something fundamentally different. At that point, another executive sticks his hand up and says, well, I've been watching a lot of films recently. They're good films, I really like them. I think we stand to learn a lot from them, because these massive armies of space fascists that crush each other beneath iron heels while puncturing slightly more remote space fascists using absurdly high caliber firearms. They're a bit impersonal, like this kind of mass of them all beating each other up. So I think possibly we need some kind of slightly shitty everyman space fascists that we can use as ciphers to tell more personal stories of bravery and redemption and romance. And at that point, another executive cuts right in saying, look, sorry, it's just shit. I'm not into this at all. In fact, if I get invited to one more conference about what tabletop war games about space fascists impaling and vaporising each other can learn from film, I'm going to kill someone, and it might be myself. I'm fed up of kowtowing to other media, and if we carry on that trajectory, then I'm just going to leave this industry because I've had enough of that. And films are a kind of lowest common denominator form of entertainment for the most part, or at least the films you're talking about are. I think we should go for a higher form of culture, like something that will really set a benchmark for tabletop war games about space fascists impaling and vaporising one another, and then trickle down into other forms of culture. So here's what I think we should do. Next time we have a wargaming tournament, we should bring a load of photographers in, and maybe some artists to do sketches as well, and have them work all day while people are playing the tabletop war games about space fascists vaporising and impaling one another. And then when we get the photos back, we can blow them up really big, like massive photos. And from the sketches, you could get some painters to work up some really big paintings, massive paintings of space fascists impaling and vaporising one another. Because them, like, you know, you've got to take a big piece of artwork seriously. We could put all of those in a gallery and have like a private view one evening with wine and nibbles, and then maybe people would get the cultural significance of space fascists impaling and vaporising one another. And there's general assent around the room to that, apart from one executive who's shaking his head gently and says, look, I really appreciate all the work you do here at Games Workshop, and I don't want this to sound too harsh, because I like you. You do a lot of valuable work for this company. But I think you have quite a naive understanding of art, and your approach is very aesthetic. And you're right to take that approach, because here at Games Workshop, we have an absolutely fantastic world-class team of artists and sculptors and painters and graphic designers. And they're really the engine that drives this company forward. So you're absolutely right to focus on them, but it is a very aesthetic focus. And the thing is, our work's not just about the aesthetics of space fascists in states of zealous imperialistic rage, eternally unfurling one another's entrails. It's about the concept of space fascists in states of zealous imperialistic rage, unfurling one another's entrails. And I think what we should do should reflect that. And also, even if we took the right approach to the art world, it is fundamentally elitist, and it would take a long time to trickle down into other forms of culture. And I think we should go for a sort of middle ground. We should create some sort of middle-brow entertainment about space fascists in states of zealous imperialistic rage, eternally unfurling one another's entrails. So here's what I think we should do. I think we should take the tropes and aesthetics of tabletop wargames about space fascists in states of zealous imperialistic rage, eternally unfurling one another's entrails, and then slightly exaggerate them in a new line of tabletop wargames about space fascists in states of zealous imperialistic rage, eternally unfurling one another's entrails. And that way we can satirise tabletop wargames about space fascists in states of zealous imperialistic rage, eternally unfurling one another's entrails. And at that point, he's completely lost everyone in the room. One of the executives asks, "What's going on?" And another says, "Well, I was with him to the point about the entrails, but everything else just lost me." Everyone looks at him and he says, "Come on guys, we could be the Stuart Lee of tabletop wargaming." I don't think Games Workshop board meetings are actually like that. I can't say for sure, I've never been to one, but I strongly suspect they're not, because there's no industry stupid enough to have those conversations except ours. And fair enough, they may not happen in the boardrooms of video game studios or publishers, but they happen at our events, they happen in our specialist press, and they happen on our blogs. And it's embarrassing. And there's a lot else besides about the video games industry that is still pretty embarrassing. It's embarrassing when the writer of Far Cry 3 is interviewed on a prominent news site and makes statements like, "Modern art has been struggling to be relevant for the past 30 years. It's embarrassing when major press launches have members of the press corralled with or near people who are being paid to scream and hoot ecstatically like some sinister multi-level marketing cult. It's embarrassing when I'm told that a major industry news site hides the fact that 40% of its readership are women and girls because all its sponsorship deals depend on selling things to dude bros. It's embarrassing when a major first-person shooter developer are invited to the experimental gameplay workshop and choose to represent their work using a video made from dubstep and guns. In fact, I really don't know what's got into first-person shooter developers these days. A sobering examination of the marginalisation of Indigenous people. But fun. A chilling long-form meditation on the effects of mass surveillance and big data. But fun. The video game gave me a comprehensive overview of the geopolitical and ecological problems facing many developing nations. And I enjoyed shooting the bad man. I'm not doing this to engage in some sort of pissing match between indie and AAA, because the dividing line between the two has never been blurrier. But there's definitely something awry when it comes to big budget first-person shooters at the moment. They seem to be trying to deal with social issues. Now, the reasons for that could be cynical attempts at marketing, desperate attempts to differentiate themselves from competitors, or perhaps sincere attempts on the part of developers and writers to address serious social issues through the medium of insanely complex technical tool chains and 400 other people. Regardless though, when they try to deal with social issues, they just end up having them as garnish on the top. And that's kind of like Michael Bay pretending that Transformers has a serious social theme, or Dan Brown pretending that his novels also have some sort of serious social impact. The rip-roaring tale of a charismatic, globe-trotting academic who solves ancient mysteries, modern conspiracies, and gives the reader a thorough grounding in the legal complexities surrounding the theft and illicit trade of global antiquities. That would be bollocks, but it seems to be what some of the larger video game studios are trying to do right now. And I think it's a phase in game development that we're going to look back on and laugh at, which is a shame given the seriousness of the issues they're trying to address. When you're running a commercial studio that provides the livelihoods of 400 staff, and the collective knowledge of those 400 staff is in an incredibly well-trodden genre, you can't really expect that to create new and exciting things. Not outside of the niche it's carved for itself already. And it'd be silly to pretend otherwise. And that makes me sad, because there are genuinely exciting people making genuinely exciting things and struggling to find an audience. The entire thing about making games is largely oriented around industry. That if you make stuff, you have to do it with a view to making a living from it. That's the indie dream. And nowadays, a lot of developers I meet seem to have just bought a lottery ticket to be Notch. I feel that kind of pressure organising Feral Vector too. It's built around things I find exciting and interesting, but I get the impression I could probably be a lot more successful and make more money if I were willing to organise the content more like a typical conference. It often feels like people are more interested in things like 5 surefire ways to sell your iOS thing, or innovative innovations for #innovators, or why this new segment of the games industry is going to fucking bury you, flay your business alive and stick a giant spike up its metaphorical bottom. But I don't want to organise an event like that because it's dull and because I see something way more exciting growing. And that's not something that can exist within the bounds of the industry we've established so far, or possibly even in the bounds of any industry at all. The thing about Games Workshop is, to many people who work in video games, they look like a big games company. But they're not. In fact, they're a small toy company, next to the likes of Hasbro or Bandai or Lego, an absolutely tiny one. And they don't pretend to be anything else. They've got quite a simple product. I mean, sure, it has incredibly complex rule sets, it has lore that teams of writers have worked on for decades, and while it may exist only in their particular fiction, it's also graphically complex. But fundamentally, it's a tabletop wargame about space fascists beating the shit out of each other. Even their own slightly creepy nomenclature refers to it as the hobby. It's just a form of entertainment. That's what they sell to people. They're not trying to do more, they're not trying to make it culturally relevant or more significant than it really is. I think something similar is true of the large studios that the video games industry has established. To us, they look like huge games companies. But in actual fact, they're tiny entertainment companies, eking out a hand-to-mouth existence, struggling to pay the bills, sometimes with very little self-determination over even so much as who owns them. The products they turn out are kind of campy and enjoyable, in the same way as Pulp Fiction or 80s slasher films. I don't have anything against those. I don't have anything against first-person shooters either. They're all things I enjoy from time to time. I just want more than that overall. I'm convinced there are more interesting creators and new audiences out there to be found. But we can't look to the industry as it exists to do that, or at least to not fuck it up. Even the segments of the industry that are mostly branded as indie. I go to a lot of indie meetups, and while there are lots of good people there, some of them are just talking about their last big studio job or the next big studio job they're applying for, and perhaps some projects they're dabbling in commercially in established genres in their spare time. And that's fine, it's still about friends meeting up. At the worst extent, there are developers who view meetups purely as marketing activity, and in that context, other developers purely as a resource. There are meetups where you can barely move, save for having a controller or iPad thrust into your hand and being asked to test something for someone. And again, to an extent, that's okay. But all of these are still arranged around industry. Maybe it's due to the current lack of cultural funding here, or maybe it's something inherent about our culture. But the UK seems to be particularly bad at stepping away from the industry part of video games industry. Video games are so much more. To find and foster those things, we need spaces and communities and events that are going to do so. If we want that stuff to happen, we might have to fight for it. No. Sorry, that was a really dumb-assed metaphor to apply to a fundamentally complicated cultural process. Let's achieve it by going out and making a load of stuff instead.